The wind on the alien planet was cold and sharp, carrying a strange scent, half smoke, half flowers. Elias pulled his coat tighter around himself as the human camp flickered in the distance. They had been stationed here for months, building metal towers and refineries on a world that never asked for them. The locals, the Vulpine, had resisted at first, fierce and clever, striking from the forests like ghosts. But lately, the attacks had stopped. The silence, though, felt even more dangerous than war. Elias was walking perimeter duty when he saw her at first. Thought it was just another shadow in the fog. But then, the shape moved, graceful, deliberate. Golden eyes caught the light, and a faint shimmer of fur gleamed in the mist. She stood tall with the poise of a predator, but there was something human in the way she moved. Her russet tail swayed slowly behind her, glowing faintly in the camp lights. The guards raised their rifles. Someone shouted, "Contact." Vulpine approaching. But she didn't run. She didn't bare her teeth or raise a weapon. Instead, she lifted her hands delicate. Clawed fingers spread open and took a slow step forward. "I come alone," she said. Her voice carried through the translator unit on her chest. Her accent was strange, soft like rustling leaves. Elias stepped forward before his commander could order fire. "Hold your fire," he said. His voice shook slightly, but his eyes stayed locked on hers. She tilted her head, studying him with curiosity more than fear. "You speak for your kind?" she asked quietly. Elias hesitated, then nodded. "I do." "For now?" Her golden eyes narrowed slightly, as if she were testing his words. Then she said something that made the entire camp fall silent. "Good," she whispered, "because I'm tired of killing yours." The air turned heavy. Every soldier gripped their weapon tighter. Elias felt a strange ache in his chest, not fear, but something else. Guilt, maybe? Or shame? Because in her voice, there wasn't hate. There was exhaustion. Elias looked at her closely now. She wasn't like the others he had seen through a scope or across a battlefield. Her fur was streaked with ash. Her left arm had a burn scar running down it. And her eyes, they looked like someone who had seen too much fire. "What do you want?" Elias asked carefully. "I want this to stop," she said simply. "Your machines dig into the roots of our forests. Your towers poison our rivers. My people fight, but for every one of ours that falls, 10 of yours arrive. We cannot win. Not like this." Elias didn't answer right away. He could feel the eyes of the whole camp on him, the commander, the soldiers. Everyone waiting for him to decide what happened next. Finally, he said, "If you came to talk, then talk. But if this is a trick," the Vulpine's tail flicked once, sharp and dismissive. "If I wanted you dead, human, you would already be." There was no boast in her tone, just fact. That scared him more than any weapon. She stepped closer, and for the first time, Elias saw how tired she looked. Her movements were slow, not from fear, but from pain. She had been walking for days, maybe weeks, to get here. "Let her in," Elias said finally. The commander barked. "Are you out of your mind? She's the enemy." Elias looked over his shoulder. "If she wanted to kill us, she wouldn't be standing here alone." The commander hesitated. The Vulpine's golden eyes flickered toward him, and he flinched under her gaze. Finally, with a grunt, he motioned for the guards to lower their weapons. Elias gestured toward the tent. "We'll talk inside." The Vulpine nodded once and followed. The soldiers whispered as she passed. Some spat on the ground, others turned away, but she didn't react. Her tail brushed lightly against Elias's arm as she walked by, soft, warm, and strangely comforting. When they entered the tent, Elias realized how small it felt with her presence inside. She didn't just walk into the room, she filled it. Her golden eyes swept over the maps, the communication screens, the weapons lined along the wall. "This is how you see our world," she said softly. Lines, numbers, targets. Elias didn't know how to respond. For a moment, he felt stripped bare-like. She could see through his uniform and into his thoughts. Then she looked at him again, her tail curling slightly behind her legs. "My name is Sira," she said. "I came to speak peace, not war." Elias nodded slowly. Then you found the only one here who's willing to listen. Outside, the soldiers muttered that he was being naive. Inside, the alien woman sat down calmly on the ground, her tail coiling beside her like a sleeping flame. And for the first time since the war began, the silence between human and Vulpine was not filled with fear, but with the faint, fragile sound of hope. Inside the tent, the air was thick with tension. The soft hum of the translator device filled the space as Sira sat cross-legged on the ground, her tail curled around her legs like a piece of living flame, glowing faintly in the dim light. Elias sat across from her, his rifle resting beside him, though his hand no longer touched it. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the wind carried the sound of the human camp agents humming, metal clanking, men shouting orders. Inside, only silence and the steady beat of two hearts from two different worlds. Finally, Sira broke the silence. "You humans," she said quietly, "you build walls around your homes and hearts. You take root in soil that does not belong to you. Do you ever ask yourself why?" Elias hesitated. "We expand to survive," he said softly. "Our own world was dying. We needed a new place." Sira's golden eyes watched him carefully. "So you came here. You burned our forests, drained our rivers, and called it survival?" Her voice didn't rise, but each word struck deep. Elias wanted to defend his people, but when he looked into her eyes, he couldn't lie. "Maybe we were desperate," he said finally. "Desperate people do terrible things." Her tail twitched. Desperation is not an excuse for cruelty. The words hit him hard. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. She was right. Deep inside, he had known it for a long time. He'd seen villages turn to ash, Vulpine children running from fire, and he'd told himself it was for progress. But progress had never sounded this hollow before. Sira leaned slightly closer, her fur catching the flicker of the lamp. "You think I came to hate you?" she said softly. "But hate is easy. Hate is what your commanders want. It feeds the fire. I came here because I am tired of watching both our peoples die for nothing." Elias rubbed his temples. "If you talk like that outside this tent, they'll shoot you before you finish a sentence." Her tail moved again, slow and deliberate. It brushed lightly against his leg, a motion that startled him. "Then I will speak to you," she said. "You will listen, and maybe you will carry my words to those who still have ears." Elias swallowed. Her tail was warm against his boot, not in a threatening way, but grounding, like a quiet reminder that she was alive, real, and trusting him with something precious. "Tell me," he said softly. "What do you want us to understand?" Sira looked down at her hands. Her claws were small, almost delicate. "We are not beasts," she said. "We live in balance with this world. Every tree, every stone, every drop of rain is part of our breath. When your machines came, the balance broke. The rivers grew sick. The air turned bitter. You see land to build on. We see home being buried." Her voice trembled, just a little. "I fought once. I killed humans with my own claws. I told myself it was justice. But after every battle, I only smelled more blood, more burning. There is no justice in ashes." Elias felt something shift inside him. He had fought too. He had told himself they were monsters. Now, hearing her speak, he wondered if the real monster had been the silence between them all along. He reached forward slightly, hesitant. "Then what do you want me to do?" "Listen," she said again simply, "and remember what you hear. Your people listen only to strength. So I came alone, not as a warrior, but as a voice." Her tail coiled tighter, wrapping once around his ankle. He froze. She looked up, her golden eyes glinting in the low light. "Do you feel that?" she asked. Elias nodded slowly. "Yes, that is connection," she said softly. "That is what your kind has forgotten. You speak to win, not to understand. You build, but never listen to the land beneath your feet. That is why your towers fall, why your hearts grow cold." The translator buzzed, almost struggling to keep up with the softness in her tone. Elias felt warmth crawl up through his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Empathy. Outside, he could hear soldiers laughing by the fires, unaware that in this small tent, history was beginning to turn. Sira finally released his leg and sat back. "Tell me, Elias," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "When you look at us, what do you see? Enemies? Animals? Or just people who were here first?" Elias opened his mouth, but no words came. He had never been good with speeches, but this wasn't about clever words. He looked at her, had the dirt on her fur, the tiredness in her eyes, the quiet strength in her voice, and he finally said the only honest thing he could. "I see someone worth listening to." For the first time, Sira smiled. It wasn't a smile of triumph, but of relief. Her tail brushed against the floor, slow and calm. "Then maybe," she said softly, "there is hope after all." And as the cold wind rattled the tent outside, Elias realized that her voice, her presence, and that single warm touch of her tail had done what months of war could not. It had made him feel human again. The next night, the camp was quiet. The soldiers had stopped watching Sira like a threat and started watching her like a question. None of them dared speak to her, but everyone felt her presence like a soft flame in the cold darkness. Elias sat near the tent again, waiting for her to return. She always came after sunset, when the engines died down and the stars began to show through the smog. When Sira stepped inside, her fur shimmered faintly in the low lamplight. She didn't say a word at first. She simply sat down, her tail curling beside her like a second body. Elias poured her a cup of warm water, and she accepted it silently. After a long pause, she spoke in a quiet voice. "You asked me yesterday what I want you to understand," she said. "Tonight, I will tell you what I lost." Elias nodded. He could feel that her words would not be easy ones. Sira's eyes drifted toward the ground. "I was born near the red forests," she said slowly. "It was a place where every tree glowed faintly at night. My people believed the forest had a heart of light. We grew up learning to listen to it. When the wind blew, it carried the songs of our ancestors." Her tail moved softly behind her, like she was touching something only she could feel. "Then your kind came," she continued, her voice trembling just a little. "You saw the glow and thought it was energy to take. You built your drills, your metal towers, your fires. We tried to stop you. We tried to speak, but your soldiers only understood orders." Elias's stomach turned. He had been one of those soldiers once, just following orders. He remembered the smoke, the flames, the sharp smell of burnt fur and trees. He looked down at his hands now and hated how steady they still looked. Sira went on, her words falling like ashes. "My mother was a healer. She used to say every wound can close if the heart remains kind. When the first bombs fell, she went to help the wounded. The air turned black. I told her to run." Sira's voice cracked, and she stopped for a moment, her hands shaking. She never came back. I found her later near the river. The water was no longer red, was gray, thick with poison. Elias felt his chest tighten. He wanted to speak, to say sorry, but the word sorry felt too small, too weak to carry the weight of what she had seen. Sira looked up at him. Her golden eyes glistened. "Do you know what it's like to smell your home burning? To hear your people crying and know you cannot save them? I led my first attack the next day. I thought revenge would stop the pain, but it didn't. Every human I killed made the fire inside me worse. And when the last forest burned, I realized something cruel." She paused. There was no victory. There was only silence. Elias looked at her tail, which now lay still and heavy on the ground. The translator flickered softly as she spoke, her voice raw but steady. "I started hating myself for hating you," she whispered. "I saw human soldiers dying in the flames, faces no older than my brothers. I began to wonder what if they were just following someone else's voice. What if they didn't know the truth?" Elias's throat felt dry. "Most of us didn't," he said quietly. "We were told this world was empty, that you were ... dangerous." She laughed bitterly, a sound that carried no joy. "Dangerous?" "Yes, because we fought for what was ours." The lamp flickered, casting shadows over her face. Elias could see the scar on her arm, the tired curve of her shoulders, the quiet strength in her stillness. She wasn't a monster. She was a survivor. Sierra took a deep breath. When I walked into your camp yesterday, I did it for my people. But tonight, I speak for myself. I am tired of fighting ghosts. I am tired of remembering fire. She looked at Elias again, her eyes soft but sharp, like a blade made of light. Tell me, human, what will you do with what I've told you? Will you carry it, or will you bury it under your cities like you buried our forests? Elias didn't answer right away. He could hear his own heartbeat. He thought of the commander, the orders, the endless reports about progress. He thought of all the faces he had forgotten to remember. Finally, he said, I can't change what's been done, but I can choose what happens next. Sierra tilted her head, studying him as if weighing the truth in his words. Then she nodded once. Good, she said quietly, because change begins when one heart decides to listen. Her tail brushed against his arm, just a soft touch, but it felt like forgiveness. Elias closed his eyes, feeling the warmth linger. Outside, the night wind blew gently, carrying the faint scent of ash and rain. Somewhere far away, a broken forest waited to grow again. And in that small tent, two voices, one human. One Vulpine sat in silence, knowing that this fragile peace between them might be the only hope left for both their worlds. The morning after. Sierra shared her story. The human camp no longer felt the same to Elias. The hum of engines sounded harsher, the smoke from the drills thicker, the people around him colder. He had spent half the night thinking about her words, the fire, the loss, the silence. He could still see her eyes when she said there was no victory, only silence. But silence didn't last long in war. By sunrise, Commander Harkins stormed into Elias's tent. His boots hit the ground hard, his face red from anger. You've been hiding her, he barked. The alien. I know she's been here. You think I don't have eyes? Elias stood slowly. She came to talk. She's not a threat. Harkins slammed his hand on the metal table, making the maps jump. She's the enemy. You want to talk to her? Fine. You can do it after we burn the rest of her kind out of the forests. Elias froze. What? Harkins straightened his uniform. Headquarters approved the strike. We move at dawn tomorrow. Full sweep. No survivors. Elias's heart pounded. You can't do that. There are civilians out there. Not civilians, the commander spat. Animals that hide behind tails and fur. You think they're people? They'd rip your throat out if they could. Elias clenched his fists. You're wrong. Harkins glared at him, his voice low and dangerous. You've gotten too close. Whatever that creature told you, forget it. She's manipulating you. They all do. You start feeling sorry for them, you'll end up dead. But Elias didn't answer. He couldn't, because deep down, he already knew Sierra wasn't the monster. That night, the camp burned brighter than usual as soldiers prepared for war. Ammunition crates, drone batteries, and fuel tanks lined the ground like scars. Elias walked between them, his chest tight, his thoughts loud. Every shout and laugh from the soldiers felt like knives twisting in his heart. He found Sierra waiting at the edge of the woods, her eyes glimmering faintly in the dark. She could tell something was wrong the moment she saw his face. They're going to attack, he said. Tomorrow. They want to wipe out your people completely. Her tail went still, her expression unreadable. I knew they would not listen, she whispered. Elias stepped closer. We can stop this. We have to. Sierra looked up at him, the firelight from the camp reflecting in her golden eyes. How do you stop a storm when your own kind is the wind? He didn't have an answer. The truth was heavy in his throat. He was one man, one soldier against an army that didn't care about right or wrong anymore. But he couldn't let her die. Not her. Not after everything she had done to reach him. I'll help you escape, Elias said suddenly. We'll get you out before the attack starts. Sierra shook her head. If I run, my people will still die. If I stay, maybe I can warn them. Maybe they'll live. You can't go alone. Then come with me, she said. Elias blinked. What? Her tail flicked once, slow and firm. If you believe your words, Human, then prove them. Walk into the forest with me. Stand where your kind drops its bombs. Look into the faces of the ones you call enemies and tell me again who deserves to die. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the faint smell of ash and oil. Elias felt torn in two. If he left the camp, he'd be branded a traitor. If he stayed, he'd be part of another massacre. There was no easy path anymore. But when he looked at Sira, tired, scarred, yet still standing, he felt something rise inside him that he hadn't felt since before the war. Courage. "All right," I said at last. "I'll go with you." Sira's eyes softened. Her tail brushed lightly against his arm, warm and steady. "Then maybe you are not lost after all." They moved quietly through the night. The soldiers were too busy preparing for battle to notice them slip away. Sira led him through the twisted roots and glowing moss of the red forest. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became. Elias could hear his own heartbeat and the faint sound of Sira's breathing beside him after hours of walking. They reached a clearing lit by bioluminescent flowers. The ground was covered in ashes, but small green shoots had begun to grow between them. Sira knelt and placed her hand on the soil. "This is where my mother died," she whispered. Elias knelt beside her. "I'm sorry," he said softly. She didn't reply for a long time. Then, finally, she said, "Don't be sorry. Just make sure no more mothers die here." He nodded. "We will. I promise." But before he could say more, a distant rumble echoed across the forest. The night sky flickered orange. The bombing had already begun. Sira's tail snapped straight, and she turned sharply toward the horizon. Elias felt a wave of dread wash over him. "They've started early," he said, voice shaking. Sira looked back at him, her golden eyes burning with fierce light. "Then we run," she said. "We run, and we make them see." And as the first fireball bloomed in the distance, Elias followed her into the dark. Not as a soldier of the human army, but as a man who had finally chosen which side of history he wanted to stand on. The forest burned behind them like a living nightmare. The night sky glowed red, and the air was thick with smoke and fear. Every step Elias took sank into ashes. His lungs hurt, but he didn't stop. Sira ran ahead of him, her tail flashing like a guiding flame in the dark. "Keep low," she shouted, her voice rough from the smoke. Elias followed, stumbling over roots and broken branches. Drones buzzed overhead, their searchlights cutting through the darkness like knives. The ground shook as explosions tore through the trees. Each blast was a reminder that the humans, his own people, were the ones raining death from above. He could hear the screams of the forest, the crack of wood, the cries of frightened creatures, the whine of engines. Somewhere far away, human soldiers shouted commands. Elias wanted to believe there was still a line between right and wrong. But out here, the only truth was survival. They reached a small stream, its water black with soot. Sira knelt and touched the surface with her fingers. "The river used to glow," she said softly. "Now it hides its face." Elias crouched beside her, catching his breath. "We have to keep moving. They'll track us soon." Sira nodded. Her fur was streaked with ash, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "There's a place ahead," she said. "A cave beneath the waterfall. We can rest there." They moved again, quieter now, using the shadows of the dying forest as cover. Elias noticed that, even as the world burned, Sira still moved with grace. She seemed part of the earth itself, like the fire could not touch her spirit when he tripped on a fallen root. She turned instantly, her tail wrapping around his arm to steady him. The warmth of it surprised him. For a brief moment, he forgot the fire, the bombs, the betrayal of his kind. "Are you hurt?" she asked. He shook his head. "Just clumsy." Sira gave a faint smile, though her eyes were tired. "Humans are not made for running in forests," she said gently. "But you are learning." Her tail uncoiled, but the memory of its warmth stayed with him. It wasn't just a touch, it was a reminder that she trusted him, enough to keep him from falling. They reached the waterfall just before dawn. The smoke had faded into mist, and the water roared with wild strength. Behind the falling curtain, Sira led him through a narrow crack into a hidden cave. Inside, The air was cool and damp. Moss glowed faintly on the walls, casting soft green light. Elias collapsed onto the ground, exhausted. His hands were shaking. His uniform was torn, his skin scratched and burned. Sira sat near him, her tail curling beside her like a blanket. She closed her eyes and listened to the sound of water. "We made it," she said softly. "For now," Elias whispered. He stared at the cave's ceiling. Drops of water fell in slow rhythm, like a heartbeat. It reminded him of home of rain tapping on windows before the war had taken everything peaceful away. After a long silence, he spoke again. "They'll think I'm dead," he said. "The commander will call me a traitor." Sira opened her eyes and looked at him. "And what do you call yourself?" He thought for a moment, then said, "Maybe. Free." A quiet smile touched her lips. Freedom always begins with a step away from orders. Her voice was soft, but the weight of her words filled the cave. Elias realized then that Sira had not just saved him from the fire, she had pulled him out of the chains. He didn't know he wore. He leaned back against the cool stone. "You were right," he said quietly. "I didn't understand what we were destroying until now." Sira's tail moved slowly, brushing against his leg. Understanding is the first step. The second is what you do with it. Outside, the waterfall shimmered as morning light broke through the mist. The forest was still burning in the distance. But here in this small hidden place, there was calm. Elias looked at her. Really looked at the faint scars beneath her fur. The gentle rise and fall of her chest as she breathed, the strength in her eyes. She was not an enemy. She was hope wearing a wounded face. "Why did you save me?" he asked after a while. Sira tilted her head. "Because you listened," she said simply. "Because when everyone else looked at us and saw animals, you looked and saw pain." Elias didn't know what to say. He just nodded slowly. They sat in silence for a long time. The sound of the waterfall was soothing, washing away the echoes of war. For a brief moment, it felt as if the world outside didn't exist. But then the faint buzz of drones returned in the distance. Sira's ears twitched. Her tail stiffened. "They are coming," she said. Elias stood quickly. "Then we'll face them together." She turned to him, her eyes fierce and bright. "Together," she repeated, and as they stepped out of the cave, back into the smoke-filled dawn, Elias knew something had changed forever. He was no longer a soldier following orders. He was a human fighting for something real, for a voice that had been silenced too long, and for a friendship born from fire and forgiveness. Whatever came next, he would not let her stand alone. By midday, the forest was alive with chaos. Smoke curled through the treetops, and the distant hum of engines grew louder. Elias and Sira moved cautiously through the undergrowth, their eyes scanning every shadow. The humans were hunting them, but now it wasn't just survival, it was a test of courage, of choice, of who they wanted to be in the face of fire. Suddenly, a sharp whistle cut through the air. Soldiers emerged from the trees, weapons raised, their boots cracking over fallen branches. Drones hovered overhead, scanning with harsh blue lights. Elias froze for a second, heart hammering. Beside him, Sira's tail flicked sharply, stiff and ready. "They want us," Elias whispered. "There's no way we can outrun them all." Sira's ears twitched, but she didn't panic. "Then we don't run," she said softly, almost as if she were teaching him. "What?" he asked, his voice tight with fear. "We face them," she said. "Not with claws, not with guns, but with truth. If they want to fight, we give them a chance to see it differently." Elias swallowed hard. His mind raced. He had been trained for war, not for peace in the middle of an ambush. But when he looked at Sira, standing tall with her golden eyes blazing, he felt the weight of her trust. The soldiers advanced cautiously. "Stand down," Elias shouted, stepping forward. "There's no need to fight her." One of the soldiers laughed. "She's a Vulpine. You want to die too?" Sira's tail rose high, curling protectively around her. "I am not your enemy," she called. Her voice carried through the forest, soft but firm. "The true enemy is hatred. The true enemy is the fire you follow without seeing what it destroys. Elias felt a tremor run through the soldiers. Some lowered their weapons slightly, confused. They had been told Vulpine were monsters. Now they were hearing words they didn't expect. Elias. Commander Harkins barked from the rear. "Pull her down. Kill her. This is an order." Elias turned toward him. "No," he shouted. "She's not your enemy. Look at her. Look at what you're doing." Sira stepped forward, her tail brushing against Elias's arm, steadying him. Her presence was calm, powerful. "You destroy everything you do not understand. I am not a weapon. I am not a target. I am life that wants to live, just as you do." The forest was silent for a long, heavy moment. Even the drones seemed to hesitate, their searchlights flickering. Elias could see doubt ripple through the soldiers. Some lowered their rifles. One by one, others followed. The commander's face turned red with rage. "Soldiers, do you disobey me?" Elias looked at Harkins and felt a courage he didn't know he had. "Yes," he said loudly, "because following orders doesn't make us right. Doing what's just does." Sira's tail wrapped lightly around his leg again, a small but steady anchor. He realized that she wasn't just protecting herself. She was teaching him what humanity could be. Compassion, bravery, choice. Harkins roared in anger and raised his weapon. Elias stepped in front of Sira. "If you shoot, you'll have to shoot me first."
Oh.
Another moment of silence fell. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The humans were soldiers, trained for obedience. But something in them wavered when they saw one of their own choose a different path. Slowly, the commander's men lowered their weapons. The tension eased, just a little, like a tide retreating from the shore. Elias breathed deeply. Sira's tail uncoiled, brushing against his arm in a quiet gesture of trust and reassurance. "You could have left me," she whispered. Elias shook his head. "And let them kill you? No. This is why we fight. Not for orders. Not for pride, but for life." Sira's eyes softened, and a faint smile curved her lips. "Then maybe your kind still has hope." The drones retreated, the soldiers hesitated, and for the first time, Elias felt that the war didn't have to end in ashes. Change was possible, even here, even now. Outside the forest, the distant fires still burned, but inside the small circle of trust. They had created something new, Anne, understanding that transcended species, weapons, and fear. Elias realized that HFY wasn't about humans defeating aliens with power or guns. It was about humans choosing empathy over obedience, courage over fear, and hope over destruction. He looked at Sira, her tail curling gently around her, and knew that whatever happened next, they had made a stand not just for survival, but for the possibility of peace, together. They had faced an army and won more than a battle. They had won a chance for the future, and as the sun began to rise through the smoky canopy, Elias felt a warmth he had not known in years. He was not alone. She was not alone. And maybe, just maybe, humanity could be better than it had ever been. Weeks had passed since the forest ambush, but the fires of war still smoldered in distant lands. Elias and Sira moved cautiously through the scarred wilderness, helping Vulpine survivors rebuild shelters and heal the wounded. The humans who had opposed them either stayed behind or quietly left the area. Word spread slowly. Not all humans were enemies, and some could be trusted. Elias had changed. Gone was the soldier who obeyed orders without question. In his place was someone who listened first, acted with care, and remembered the faces behind every report. And Sira, she had changed too, in ways subtle and profound. Her tail no longer twitched with constant tension. It moved with calm authority, like a banner of hope, wrapping lightly around those in need. They had found a small clearing, where green shoots of the red forest were beginning to rise from the ashes. Sira knelt to touch the earth, her fingers brushing the soft, damp soil. Elias watched her, feeling the weight of everything they had endured together. "This is where it begins," Sira whispered. The forest will grow, and my people will live again. But it will not happen without the humans who choose to see us as we are. Elias knelt beside her, letting the gentle warmth of her tail brush against his arm. And we will help, he said. We can rebuild what was lost, together. She looked at him, her golden eyes reflecting the early morning light. You've kept your promise, she said softly. Not just to me, but to everything we care for. Soft wind stirred the saplings. It carried the faint scent of rain and smoke, of earth and life intertwined. Elias felt a quiet pride swell inside him, not for himself, but for the chance they had created. A chance for humans and Vulpine to stand side by side instead of against each other. Do you ever think they'll understand? He asked quietly. The rest of your kind? My commanders? Sira smiled faintly. Some will. Some never will. But it only takes a few hearts willing to listen to begin a change. Her tail wrapped lightly around his waist as they stood together. It was not a barrier, but a bridgey, a living connection that reminded him that courage could be gentle. That strength could be shown through care, and that one choice could ripple into the future. Elias looked at the horizon. The sun broke through the mist, lighting the forest in gold. The smoke of the past still lingered, but light was stronger. He realized that HFY, the true meaning, was not just about humans triumphing over aliens with weapons or cunning. It was about humanity's ability to choose better, to act with empathy, and to see value in every life, even those not like their own. Sira's hand touched his. You were brave, she said. Not because you fought, but because you chose not to follow the wrong path. That is what humans can be, better than their orders, better than their fear. Elias swallowed, feeling the weight and warmth of her words. He remembered the burning forests, the mothers lost, the cries he had ignored for too long. And he remembered the first time her tail had brushed against him in the camp tent, the first spark of connection that had grown into trust, understanding, and finally, hope. They'll learn, he whispered, even if it takes time. Sira's tail moved gently, brushing over the new sprouts in the clearing. They will, she said, because they can choose to see, not just conquer. And every step we take toward understanding is a step they cannot erase. Elias took a deep breath. For the first time in months, the ache in his chest eased. The war was not over, but the future was not lost. Humanity and the Vulpine had a chance to be more than destruction. They could be caretakers, protectors, and allies. Sira stepped closer, letting her tail wrap softly around him once more. It was comforting, grounding, and filled with silent promise. We begin again, she whispered. Elias nodded. Together, he said, the forest whispered around them. Tiny green shoots pressed through the blackened soil. Birds, unseen for weeks, began to sing. The world, though scarred, had not ended. And in the middle of it, two beings, one human, one Vulpine, stood side by side, proof that courage, empathy, and understanding could heal even the deepest wounds as the sun rose higher. Its light touched Sira's fur, making it glow like fire. And Elias knew that this moment their bond, their choice, their hope, was the true victory. Not of armies, not of weapons, but of hearts brave enough to care, strong enough to act, and wise enough to listen. And with her tail wrapped gently around him, Elias finally understood what it meant to be truly human.